Okay, Rogan come home the other day from the book fair from school, and he got this fossil digging kit. I don't know how well you can see this or whatever, but here it is, a fossil digging kit. And in this fossil digging kit, it came with this little book of lies right here. And I wanted to talk about this. Also has something I found very interesting right here at the top. I don't know if you can see that or not. I can't see what you're seeing, but there's a little X with an O around it, which maybe you could look that up on your own. But yeah, that's not a good symbol. So in the little book of lies, every page is stuffed with the billions of years and the Darwin theory or whatever. So I just want to talk about that and what this book says. You can go down to the library at the school where he goes to school at right now, and I guarantee you, check me, see if I'm wrong. Go down there, go into the library, and pick up any first grade reader book that's in there about dinosaurs and pull them out and look at them, and they'll all say the same thing in the first couple pages or something like this. It'll say millions and millions of years ago. They all start out that way. They gotta they gotta get you to believe more than anything, because every page of this book, just about every single page of this book, tells you about millions and millions of years, or billions of years even. That's how this one starts out. Millions and millions of years ago, Earth was a home to many plants and animals that are extinct today. How do we know this? By the clues that they left behind. Of course, these clues are called fossils. They are keys that help us to unlock the planet's ancient past. There's something that everybody ought to know about fossils. When you dig a dinosaur bone or a fossil out of the ground, it doesn't have a toe tag on it that says this was made by a dinosaur 80 million years ago in Taiwan or whatever. They don't come like that. You have to do some checking to figure out where they come from. There's one authority, the Bible, will tell you where they come from. But no one wants to go there. I don't want to talk about that. See, if you have this way of thinking, you don't have anybody to answer to or be accountable to. Next page. Before they were fossils. Now, before you dive into this big subject here, it says, before we dive into our investigation on fossils, let's back up a few years. 4.5 billion to be exact. So they're telling you exactly 4.5 billion years ago. Around this time, a bunch of rocks and dust clumped together in outer space to form our planet. Oh my. You can't have no kind of creation thinking behind this stuff. You'll see why in a minute. Earth was completely lifeless for a long, long time. It took about 1 billion years for the first bacteria from the planet seas. It took billions more years for tiny animals to appear. Things moved more quickly after that, and life erupted. And about 230 million years ago, dinosaurs were king of the earth. Okay, here we're telling you a bunch of dust and rocks and stuff got together, formed the planet, Earth, and then it rained on those rocks, and we end up with pools of water, and bacteria started to grow in these pools of water, and lightning struck them or something, and they come alive, and then now we have frogs, birds, and lizards, and skunks, and people come from that. I was listening to Kent Hovind one time, and he was talking about having this debate with this professor, and the professor got mad, and he stood up and he said, Hovind, you're so stupid. You want all these kids in here to believe that all the dog varieties of the earth, which is about 400 and some, all the dog varieties of this earth come from 2 dogs off Noah's Ark. Now, you know how stupid that sounds. How do you expect kids to believe that? He said, well, sir, how do you expect them to believe what you're teaching them, that all the dog varieties of this entire earth come from a rock? That's a good point. So these people believe you come from a rock. Okay, then it goes into the Jurassic period. Jurassic period, Cretaceous period, and it tells you that Jurassic period is 200 million to 250 million years ago. The Jurassic period is 145 to 200 million years ago. It goes through that. So automatically, if you dig up a Tyrannosaurus rex bone and you look at it and say, hey, this is a Tyrannosaurus rex bone, they already have a date for it. They already know that it's going to be between 145 to 200 million years old. They date the fossils by the rocks that they find them in, and they date the rocks by the fossils. It's just circular reasoning. It's craziness. Okay, there's more stuff there, but I'm going to go on past it. Did you know that dinosaurs once roamed the earth? But what exactly are dinosaurs? We can get a hint from the word dinosaur, which comes from the Greek word meaning terrible lizard. Yeah, did you know that the word dinosaur is a relatively new word? I think in 1841, I believe, I'm not mistaken, they come up with the word dinosaur, which meant terrible lizard. I think the guy was a dentist or something, and he found a tooth, and he said, "Hey, this looks it's exactly like a iguana's tooth, but it's huge, it's great big." And so anyway, they dug these fossils up, and he's the one that coined the name dinosaur, which meant terrible lizard. The Bible talks about dinosaurs in several places in there, but it always calls them dragons. Not, I guess it don't always call them dragons. It calls them dragons most of the time when it talks about dinosaurs. There's a good chapter, or there's a good verse in Job chapter 40. It talks about a dinosaur, a specific type of dinosaur. It even has a name called Behemoth. Let's see if I can find it here. Job chapter 40. Job chapter 40. You got a Bible? I want you should look this up, because this is fascinating. God's talking to Job here in chapter 40. In verse 15, he tells him, he says, "Look now at Behemoth." And check your Bible and see, but most all the Bibles I've looked at have a little footnote there. And this one says footnote. And you go down to the bottom of the footnote, and it says this is possibly talking about a hippopotamus or an elephant. Remember, the words down here on the bottom, they're man's interpretation. They're not the inspired word. But look what the scripture says. It says, "Behold now the behemoth which I made with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox." So whatever this thing is, we're going to figure it out here. Whatever this thing is, it feeds on grass like an ox. Well, you say, well, yeah, hippopotamuses or elephants, they feed on grass like an ox. So maybe it is a hippopotamus or an elephant. It says, "What strength he has in his loins. He has power and muscles in his belly." So he has a big belly. So, well, elephants and hippopotamus, I guess you would say, they could have a big belly. Then it says this, "His tail, it sways like a cedar tree." Have you ever seen a hippopotamus's tail or an elephant's tail? It wouldn't make you think of a cedar tree, would it? It says his muscles are tight and close-knit, and his bones are like tubes of bronze. His limbs are like rods of iron. He had big bones. He had big, strong bones. He ranks first or chief among all the works of God. So he's the biggest thing God's ever made. Yet can't his maker approach him with a sword? So God's saying he's made him. He can take him out. The hills bringing produce, and the wild animals play nearby. And under the lotus plant he lies, hidden in the reeds and the marsh. So whatever this animal is, he lives in the reeds and the marsh and the swamps. We know that Brachiosaurus and those great big dinosaurs, they lived in marshes. Lotus conceals him in the shadow of the poplars by the streams. So again, he's in the streams surround him. When a river rages, he's not alarmed. He's secure. So he's a big animal. The flood comes, doesn't hurt him none. Can anyone capture him or trap him or pierce his nose? Can you imagine how big that dinosaur was? Nobody's going to trap him, capture him, pierce his nose, right? Only God can approach him. That's a good example of a dinosaur in the Bible right there. There's hundreds, I don't know if hundreds, there's lots and lots more places where the Bible talks about dragons too. So, well, there's that, and this page goes into specifics on like dinosaurs. T-Rex, he lived 85 to 65 million years ago. Triceratops lived 70 million years ago. Every page. Pterodactyls lived 70 to 83 million years ago. Every page tells you that these animals lived millions of years ago. And I just stated as fact. Now this page here, it kind of floors me too. It's talking about the Mesozoic era. And it says this at the bottom. Oh my goodness, you probably can't see this right here. It's what it says. No living person has ever seen an actual dinosaur. Humans didn't emerge until about 200,000 years ago. That's way, 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 way after dinosaurs died out. The fool that wrote this would have to know something that nobody can possibly know. He'd have to talk to every person on this planet that ever lived to be able to make this statement, wouldn't he? Do you think this guy ever talked to Adam and Eve before he wrote this, that no human being has ever seen a dinosaur? Did he talk to you before he wrote that? How does he know that no human being on this earth has ever seen a dinosaur? In fact, there's all kind of artifacts and things from all over the world where people thousands of years ago have drawn pictures of dinosaurs on cave walls, and in the Grand Canyon there's pictures of dinosaurs that the Indians had drawn. Exactly what they looked like. There's carvings and reliefs, and these dinosaurs show up on swords and all kind of things. There's all kind of stuff around the world that show dinosaurs depicted. And if these people hadn't seen these things, how can I draw a picture of them? So that's not good science there. What else is on here? Now this page. This is a good page. This page they actually have some real science in here that tells you how something works. It says, it's talking about what are fossils, how fossils begin. It says, fossils begin when organic materials are buried in sediment. Clue. Sand, ash, mud settles on the bottom of lakes or swamps or rivers and other bodies of water. Because they are buried, the organic materials are protected from the elements and they do not decay. How do you get a fossil? You got to bury it. Drive up and down the road and look at all the dead deer and skunks and groundhogs and possums laying along the road. How many of those things are going to turn into fossils? Zero, right? A vulture is going to come, eat it, drag it around. A dog going to drag it off the road, and it's going to lay there and rot. It has to be buried and squished to be a fossil. It's the only way you get them. So now, if the Bible is right, and there was a worldwide flood like it says there was, then you should be able to expect to find millions of bones buried in sedimentary layers in the ground. Guess what we find? Millions of bones buried in sedimentary layers in the ground, right? Maybe that book knows what it's talking about. All right, I'll hurry up and get through this. That page just talks about different types of fossils. Nothing on that one really. This takes you how to make your own fossil. This page is a pretty good one because it tells you that you can never be a scientist. That's what it feels like when you read this whole thing. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says it says this. Think about it. Could you even tell the difference between a rock or a fossil or a regular rock? Would you even know where to look for a fossil? You probably wouldn't. And then it goes on to tell you that scientists and paleontologists is the only people that's really qualified to be able to do this kind of thing. It's crazy. The average person can't dig a dinosaur bone up, I guess. That's what they're saying here. And it talks about field work. About getting the bones out of the fossil. And this is one of the killers. This is, right here, is one of the biggest, bold-faced lies in this book. Well, there's several, but this one is a really good one. This one's dumb. It says, how old is it? Scientists use chemicals called potassium argon to see how old fossils are. Here's how it works. All fossils contain both of these chemicals. As fossils age, though, the potassium inside them turns to argon. This means that the older fossils contain more argon than potassium. Sometimes fossil hunters use another method called carbon-14 dating to double-check their results. This is a lie, complete lie. If you dig up a dinosaur bone right now and you took it to a lab and you said, look, I found this Triceratops bone, I want you to carbon date it for me, they'll absolutely refuse to carbon date your dinosaur bone because they already know back here that the dinosaur bone is 45 million years old, and carbon-14 dating don't work 45 million years old. So they won't do it. If you can trick them into carbon-14 dating your dinosaur bone, it will come back with carbon. They always come back with carbon-14 dating. They always come back and say, well, it's 20,000 years old. They don't use carbon-14 because it don't go back far enough. So they use potassium argon. Potassium argon works exactly the same way that the carbon-14 dating does, and there's some flaws with that. There's I got a whole video on carbon-14 dating. You can go watch that video. Tells all about it, how it works, why it don't work, the wild dates you get with it and everything. Potassium argon works exactly the same way, only using potassium argon instead of carbon-14. And what the problem is you have to assume some things to get those dates. You have to assume how much argon was in it to start with versus potassium. It's like it's hard to explain. The other video explains it a little better. But if you had a candle, this is what most people use to illustrate this. If you had a candle and say it was 10 inches tall, and you walk into the room and the candle's burning, and I ask you the question, when did the candle get lit? Now you can do some scientific stuff and you can measure the candle, so that's 10 inches tall. I'm going to observe it for a while. You watch it burn for a couple hours and it burns, well, 1 inch every 2 hours. And you can say, okay, it burns 1 inch every 2 hours. How does that get me any closer to when it was lit? Because you have to assume that you know how tall it was before it was lit. You have to assume that it always burned at the same rate that it's burning at now. Same thing with the carbon-14. You have to assume several things to be able to even come up with a date. It just don't work. We could go into that forever. We'll go on past that. So how old is it? That is a bold-faced lie in this book. And then it talks about where skeletons on display and how to get your dinosaur bones out of your box. Lies. And this is a religion that I have to pay for my kid to go to school there. We can't talk about the Bible, but we can talk about their religion. And this is a religion because there's no fact or proof of this stuff. They have to take it on faith. So it kills me. This somewhere, this right here, some kid is going to get this somewhere, and it's going to ruin his faith in the God of the Bible because he believes this crap. It's dangerous. All right, go read your Bible.